Fellas, it is finally time once again, as Blue Archive's 4.5 anniversary is at long last arriving to global this Tuesday as part of the new event, Summer Sky's Promise. And to kick things off, both Swimsuit Seiya and Swimsuit Hasumi's banners are first arriving this week as the new limited 3-star units, whereas Swimsuit Ichika is the event's welfare student. Meanwhile, Swimsuit Mika and Swimsuit Nagisa will only be debuting as the 4.5 FES units in global next week. Also remember that we will be getting free 100 pulls over the course of Swimsuit Seiya and Swimsuit Hasumi's banners, and these free pulls only apply to these two banners. They do not carry over to Swimsuit Nagisa's and Swimsuit Mika's, so try to log in every day for this period to automatically claim them. In this video, I will be reviewing Swimsuit Hasumi and Swimsuit Ichika, while Swimsuit Seiya has been reviewed in a separate video. Link is in the pinned comment. Anyways, without further ado, here is a short review of Swimsuit Hasumi and Swimsuit Ichika. Boys, we're starting off with Koharu's idol. It's the beautiful and insanely freaking hot Vice President of Trinity's JTF, who is finally in a swimsuit 4 years after she wanted to follow Tsurugi and Mashiro to the beach. It's Swimsuit Hasumi! Fellas, I apologize. I'm not gonna be putting in much Swimsuit Hasumi artwork as I don't want this video to get demonetized like the rest of my videos lately. It seems that YouTube-kun doesn't, like all these artwork and stuff, and now with Swimsuit Hasumi, it's going to be even more risky for obvious reasons. So I'm sorry, I hope y'all understand, especially my Hasumi bros. But good golly gumdrops, fellas, her new swimsuit alt is just wow. I couldn't believe that they somehow made one of the hottest characters even hotter. First, we've got that black skimpy swimsuit that's barely even trying to hide her giant watermelons. It really shows how big hers actually are, and I argue that it might even be the biggest in Kivoto's perhaps. Like, Aku's reaction to it in this card really says it all. There's also the string-tight swimsuit, which really shows off a great figure. I'm also in love with her new hairstyle. I like that they kept the somewhat messy appearance while also freshening it up with that new sort of side bun ponytail. This new hairstyle is probably my favorite of her so far. That's saying something, cause I really like a sports version's ponytail. It makes her sexier and it definitely fits her swimsuit vibe. And let's not forget about her beautiful face with those red crimson eyes. She looks like a rare beauty at the beach, ready to have a fun time behind the rocks with a boyfriend, aka a sensei. Overall, I am digging her new swimsuit design, and I'm glad that they doubled down on its riskiness, cause it has given birth to some absolutely amazing quote-unquote fan art that has definitely squeezed my Binaha dry. Finally, we gotta quickly talk about that L2D. If you want a better view of a Hasumi's, this is the perfect L2D. Being able to see that sexy figure and her giant watermelons up close, alongside that adorable embarrassed face waiting for our opinion on it. Lord of mercy, I need her just for this L2D, and my Hasumi bros, especially my boy Sylvian, you guys are freaking winning. So, what kind of student is Swimsuit Hasumi? Well, she is a limited piercing DPS striker with raid armor who has D combat power in urban terrains, S combat power in field, and B combat power indoors. Plus, she also uses the standard DPS equipment set consisting of head, pin, and watch. So, how good is Swimsuit Hasumi? Well, she is mainly a strong yellow AoE DPS unit who is less of a mobber and more of a proper yellow AoE damage dealer who can deal high amounts of damage. Firstly, her 5-cost EX allows her to deal good yellow AoE damage to enemies in a fan-shaped area, with its 866% multiplier at max level. This skill is her primary damage outlet, and it is pretty simple yet powerful thanks to its fairly high damage multiplier plus the other self-buffs in her kit. While its 45-degree angled fan shape can be slightly tricky to use, cause usually the student needs to be in an appropriate position, otherwise they might miss an enemy or two, its radius is actually quite wide, and it is also very long at 11.5 meters, capable of reaching further than most other conventional fan-shaped EXs, like Bunny Currents, Momois, and Swimsuit Hinas. Hence, with this big AoE EX, she is able to hit a bunch of enemies at once, including those that are pretty far away, though again, a normal round-shaped EX is still generally easier to utilize. However, it is a bit expensive at 5 costs, so as usual, you'd ideally pair her with cost reduction units to have it down down to 3, as well as Rio to copy it and decrease the duped EX by at least 1 cost. Next, with a sub-skill, whenever her EX deals damage to an enemy 4 times, she accumulates 1 cut watermelon stack for 43 seconds, stacking up to a max of 4 times. And each stack held increases her crit damage by 6.2% at level 10 skill. Her EX unleashes 5 hits in one use, gaining 1 watermelon stack every 4 times her EX damages an enemy, meaning she obtains 1 stack whenever she damages one enemy as her EX hits them 5 times with 1 activation. So, in order to get the maximum 4 cut watermelon stacks, she will need to deal damage with her EX 16 times by hitting 4 enemies at once with 1 EX so that she damages them 20 times, immediately accumulating all 4 stacks. However, if her EX kills the enemy within, let's say, the 3rd hit, then it only counts as 3 hits. So she is much more effective against groups of enemies with a lot of HP since they can take all 5 hits, compared to easily killable mobs which might reduce the amount of hits they take or a single enemy as it will be tougher to build her stacks. Not only that, her crit damage is increased by a max of 24.8% whenever she has 4 watermelon stacks. Thus, it is best to quickly amass her stacks so she can gain this buff ASAP. Plus, it lasts for a long 43 seconds, the same duration of a watermelon stacks, so you don't really need to rush to refresh them. Meanwhile, her max level basic skill further grants her a 24.4% crit damage buff every 35 seconds for 30 seconds, while also allowing each cut watermelon stack to increase her crit rate by 8.9% for the same duration. This skill is particularly useful since it can increase her crit by a good 35.6% if she has all 4 stacks, so you should quickly build up her watermelon stacks before her basic activates so that she can gain the maximum crit rate buff. Not only that, her basics and subs crit damage buffs combined result in a nearly 50% crit damage increase, significantly boosting her damage output. Plus, her buffs 30-second durations are average and there's only a 5-second downtime between activations after the initial one. Her Enhance and Enhance skill plus at UE40 increase her attack, with the latter being a good investment for higher difficulty content as she'll need more damage to clear out the stronger enemies at these difficulties. Lastly, at UE50, her field combat power is upgraded from S to SS, whereas her piercing effectiveness is increased by 10% at UE60. While her UE50 can also be a decent investment cause the improved terrain mode allows her to deal better damage in field terrains, her UE60 isn't exactly needed cause not only is the damage increase pretty minimal, but getting to this level requires a lot of LFs, so you can forgo it unless you have a butt ton of Eligma to spare or you got really lucky in your Swimsuit Hasumi pulls. Overall, Swimsuit Hasumi is a strong piercing AoE damage dealer thanks to her powerful EX as well as her ability to gain potent crit and crit damage buffs simply by using her EX more often against groups of enemies. So, where can Swimsuit Hasumi be used in? Well, despite being a strong piercing AoE DPS unit, she hasn't been used much due to lack of content that requires such units, with most existing yellow armored content that have groups of enemies needing mobbers instead as they comprise of easily defeatable mobs. For instance, she isn't that good for cheesed, cause a cut watermelon stack accumulation might potentially take slightly longer, as her EX could possibly take out the minions pretty easily. But more importantly, she takes 2 times damage from their raid attacks on Insane and above, and there are also other better yellow AoE DPS mobbing options to choose from who are more specialized in clearing out these minions. With all that said, her main use so far actually lies in yellow Tifaref. I won't go into detail about the boss's mechanics in this video. If you want, go check out a proper in-depth guide on this boss by other amazing creators, but essentially her role against Tif is pretty similar to Swimsuit Yukari. With a powerful EX, she is able to take out the 4 laborers that spawn around 2 or all 3 of his cores, especially after she's buffed, even being capable of defeating 2 groups or 8 laborers if positioned correctly with a repositioner, as her EX can reach across the battlefield with its long cone range. Plus, she can also gain/refresh her max watermelon stacks by simply using her EX once on 4 laborers, as they can receive all 5 hits from her EX since they have a lot of HP, especially on the higher floors. Thus, this allows her to prevent the boss from healing himself when he shuts down his cores and attempts to recall the laborers. Not to mention, for every laborer your team kills, it deals damage to Tif equal to 1% of his max HP while increasing his groggy gauge. Plus, she can also dish out additional damage to him as her EX will hit his cores at the same time. Also, during the 1 one-shot rotating laser sequence whenever his ATG gauge is maxed out, Sensei Hasumi's EX will be able to quickly demolish the obstacles that he summons, being strong and wide enough to destroy most of them in one use. Plus, her 5 cost is not an issue at all, cause your cost meter recovers faster in final restriction, and she takes less damage from his yellow attacks from floor 50 onwards. Hence, these have resulted in Sensei Hasumi being an excellent yellow AoE DPS pick for this raid, having become one of the main damage dealers for a number of Sensei's teams, cause there currently aren't many proper yellow AoE options who can effectively deal with the laborers, as a lot of them are mobbers who won't have enough firepower. However, her primary competition for this boss is Swimsuit Yukari, who is much more preferred by many senseis because of her better indoor terrain mood and simpler to use round shaped EX. Again, Hasumi's angle means you could potentially miss one of the laborers if you don't aim it carefully or if she is in a bad position, compared to Swimsuit Yukari's regular circular EX that you can place with ease, thus making her the more consistent, easier option despite Swimsuit Hasumi's damage potential being higher. Regardless, Swimsuit Hasumi is still a great choice for TFRF, especially if you don't have Swimsuit Yukari / can't borrow her, as she would definitely be a big help in defeating this boss. Aside from Tiff, while Swimsuit Hasumi hasn't really been brought into any other content so far, she could be useful for certain raids in the future, such as Yellow Indoor Pararodzilla to deal damage to him and his minions, though I'd assume Swimsuit Yukari would be the superior option again. Perhaps Yellow Field Kiten Phase 1 to hit a few of the ranges at once with her EX, or Indoor Yellow Gregorius in an additional team whenever it reruns. One last mode that she can be used in is PvP. I ain't too knowledgeable on PvP, but she can apparently quickly take out any yellow armored backliners, especially if they are scattered thanks to her EX's shape, making her similar to Bunny Karin back in the early days and Swimsuit Hanako, though her firepower isn't enough to one-shot durable yellow armored tanks such as Hoshino. Overall, should you pull for Swimsuit Hasumi? Well, if you're looking to do good in yellow TFRF, or perhaps you'd like to try her out in PvP, though I ain't too sure if the current season suits her, again, not a PvP enthusiast, or if you want to be prepared for any future yellow content that may require yellow AoE heavy hitters like her, then sure, you may pull for her. Not to mention, she is a limited anniversary student who hasn't had a rerun in JP since she only came out a few months ago, so it may be worth getting her now, particularly if you're a limited collector. However, gameplay wise, I also personally feel that you should prioritize getting Swimsuit Seiya cause she is used in way more content as a powerful and unique hyper buffer. So in my opinion, you may skip Swimsuit Hasumi if you want to fully focus on getting Swimsuit Seiya, perhaps cause you're chasing meta / she's your waifu, or if you've used up all 3 100 pulls and you still haven't gotten Hasumi and you need to save your paroxysms for the FES units next week, or you just don't care about doing TFRF at all, or if you're a newer player as you most likely won't be doing final restriction until way later and Swimsuit Seiya looks to be a better investment for the future. Regardless, if you've already gotten Swimsuit Seiya and you still have some of the free 100 pulls left / a ton of paroxysms to spare, or if Swimsuit Hasumi is your waifu and you want to jock it to her L2D, then go ahead and pull for her. Let's move on to the JTF's Harem Master and the evolved Mob-chan, though I just can't prove it yet. It's Swimsuit Ichika Uses. Guys, I love all the JTF girls. My favorite is still Mashiro, but Ichika is definitely a close second. And holy, I'm in love with her new swimsuit. While she's not the biggest like her 2 JTF senpais, her modest calcium cannons are still sexy in their own right, and that simple black triangle bikini is such a good fit, highlighting her underrated sexiness and that exposed delicious tummy that will have my babies after I'm done with her in the beach tent. There's also those cute denim shorts with the loose belt that's unzipped to sexily reveal her bikini bottoms. Good golly gumdrops swimsuits with these kinds of shorts really tickle my pickle, and that baggy jacket as well as those black shades also very much add to her cool casual swimsuit vibe. The thing that seals the deal for me though is her hair. The random messy strings of hair as if we were just done playing behind the rocks, her slightly curly flowy hair this time around drooping over her bare shoulders. Guys, if all Filipino girls are this hot, I'm moving there immediately. All in all, I am a big fan of her swimsuit alts design. It's not the flashiest or the skimpiest, but it is hot in its own right and I adore its simplistic casual vibe. Might also be helped that I actually like Ichika, cause not only do I like characters with closed eyes, but I love how she seems like a chill laid-back girl when deep down she has a destructive personality capable of rivaling even Tsurugi, and it only shows up when she reaches was her breaking point. Kasumi unfortunately found out the hard way, and I can't wait to see more of their interactions in this new event. Lastly, her L2D is absolutely god tier. The way she's kabedoned us like an ikemen with that cheeky charismatic smile and the open eyes, plus the exposed armpits that I wanna sniff. Also knowing the context of the scene, I'm not spoiling anything, but boy, I find myself falling in love with her each passing day. In fact, I had it as my main L2D on JP for a few weeks, cause it felt like I was greeting my handsome girlfriend when I logged in. I joined her in hell, no questions asked. So, what type of student is she? Swimsuit Ichika is a welfare special sonic supporter who has A combat power in urban terrains, B in field, and C indoors, having equipped the gloves, bag, and watch for her equipment, with the gloves and watch giving her a slight boost in firepower. Now, is Swimsuit Ichika any good? Well, she is a very niche but fairly useful welfare unit, mainly excelling as a crit damage rest debuffer, partially thanks to her EX skill. As with it, she can deal small damage to one enemy with its 242% multiplier at max level, while decreasing their crit damage rest by 35.3% for 30 seconds, as well as applying the focus assault debuff on them for the same duration. This crit damage rest debuff basically increases the damage the enemy receives from critical hits, allowing her to somewhat increase your DPS unit's damage output, especially against an enemy with really high crit damage rest, though usually this debuff doesn't contribute as much to damage. There's also her rare focus assault debuff, making her extra valuable as she is the 5th student as well as the first 1-star unit who is able to apply this debuff, letting your students basically prioritize targeting the enemy with this debuff. So she is a very solid free-to-play option for any content that requires it. Not only that, while the damage this skill dishes out is insignificant because she's a supporter, it is actually very cheap at 2 costs, making it easy to activate and refresh her debuffs. Next, with a level 10 basic skill, she further reduces one enemy's crit rest and crit damage rest by 15.2% and 20.5% respectively for a decent 20 seconds, while dealing small amounts of damage to them with his 103% multiplier every 35 seconds. The skill's damage is very little because of its really low multiplier, but the additional crit damage rest debuff can be pretty useful, and combined with her EX means she can shred through one enemy's crit damage rest by a whole 55.8%, and you can even ensure her basic hits the boss through her EX's focus assault debuff. Meanwhile, the small crit rest debuff can be handy against enemies with high crit rest, as it increases the chances of the enemy receiving a critical hit, but sadly it isn't that good because of its low value, and similar to crit damage rest debuffs, it doesn't increase your student's damage by a lot. Plus, she can't manually plant it, unlike New Yu Haruka and Swimsuit Saki, who have stronger crit rest debuffs and they can instantly apply this debuff with their EX. Aside from that, her sub-skill increases her allies' attack speed by 17.3%, which can be decent for AA-centric teams because it allows them to dish out their stronger normal attacks faster, though it's generally not as useful as other better universal sub-skills. Moving on, her Enhanced and Enhanced Skill Plus at UE40 increase her attack, both of which aren't a priority because the damage output doesn't matter, so in my opinion 3-star or UE30 Swimsuit Ichika is usually enough. Lastly, at UE50, her indoor combat power is improved from C to B, while her max cost is up by 0.5 at UE60. Both of these are needed since the former only really increases her damage, while the latter is too expensive, and I personally feel that the slight cost increase isn't really worth that amount of investment. Overall, Swimsuit Ichika is primarily good at decreasing one enemy's crit damage rest, while also having the rare ability to apply the focus assault debuff through her extremely cheap EX. So, where can Swimsuit Ichika be used in? Well, she hasn't been brought into much content so far, as there aren't a lot of enemies who have extremely high crit rest and crit damage rest that need reducing. Plus again, these debuffs aren't exactly the best, since they don't contribute to damage as much compared to defense debuffs and damage buffs. Regardless, she has at least found her niche in Yesod, the new purple raid boss who will be coming to global in a few months, having been brought into some Sensei's teams mainly on Lunatic, though you can obviously obviously utilize her on the lower difficulties too if needed, as her crit damage rest debuffs will be a big help in lowering his exorbitant 300% crit damage rest on Torment and Lunatic, and she is used specifically in Phase 2. Not only can she reduce his right hands and the pillar's high crit damage rest through her EX and basic skills, but she can also apply the Focus Assault debuff onto the right-sided pillars, aka the Pillars of Foundation, as well as its hand after destroying said pillars, with this debuff being absolutely required for this phase, since the 4 support drones that accompany each of your striker students deal a fixed 100% additional damage to targets that have this debuff, which you should definitely take advantage of since these drones have very high base attack, even possessing an extra passive 100% attack buff. Plus, you can further boost their firepower by buffing your units through EX and basic skills, as any buffs your striker students receive are transferred to their respective drones. So for instance, you increase your students' attack speed using an EX skill, the drones will also get the attack speed buff. So combine these with Ichika's Focus Assault debuff that helps with the raids mechanic, allows the drones to deal a butt ton of damage to the pillars and his hand. Hence, these have made Swimsuit Ichika a good free-to-play option for this raid, as she can effectively deal with some of this phase's mechanics all for a very cheap 2 costs. However, she hasn't seen as much use as you'd expect in this raid, since she isn't as good as other more specialized Focus Assault / crit damage rest appliers. For example, Swimsuit Izuna and Noah for the former, and Nyuyo Haruka for the latter, resulting in Swimsuit Ichika being more or less a unit to use if you don't have any of those other students / for an additional team if needed. Nevertheless, she is still a good unit for this raid, and you can definitely use her in one of your teams on whatever difficulty, though her crit damage rest debuff will only really be valuable on Torment and Lunatic, as he has a lot of crit damage rest on these difficulties and not really on Insane and below. Overall, how much should you farm for Swimsuit Ichika? Well, in my opinion, even though she's very useful for Yesod, you can just get her to 3 stars or at max UE 30, cause again, her role in the team is to debuff and not do damage, so she won't really need the improved terrain mood and additional 0.5 costs at UE 50 and UE 60. Also, even if you aren't interested in using her at all in Yesod, I'd still recommend getting her to at least 3 star so you may unlock her sub skill. But as always, if she is your waifu, then go ahead and farm for her alefs as much as you want. I mean, it's an excuse to play the new Slay the Spire-esque minigame, which is pretty freaking fun. And that's all for this review. Again, the Swimsuit Seiya review has already been uploaded in a separate video. I'll leave the link to it in the pinned comment. Anyways, thanks for watching. Let me know who you're pulling for if you are. Good luck with your pulls, and I'll see y'all in the next one.